Tonight, let us begin with a gentle breath, the kind that softens the weight you've been carrying all day. Outside, the world may still be restless, but here, within this quiet space, you are safe to rest. Marriage, love, companionship, these are not easy roads. They are tender, yet often complicated. And as we reach the middle stretch of life, we begin to see them in a new light. Less about passion, more about reflection. This is not a story of loss. It is a soft unfolding, an invitation to sit with what is real without judgment, to touch the quiet truths of marriage and the even quieter truths of ourselves. So, lean back. Let the sound of gentle rain remind you that you are not alone. We will walk slowly together into this reflection. There comes a time in many marriages when silence grows louder than words. Not the silence of comfort, but the silence of distance. You share the same roof, the same table, the same bed, yet feel like two parallel lives moving side by side, rarely touching. It is often called being single within marriage. Not divorced, not even hostile, just quietly apart. The arguments that once shook the walls have faded, but so have the tender gestures, the spontaneous laughter, the soft touches that once lit up ordinary days. What remains is a quiet endurance. Hands still join on holidays, smiles still appear in family photos, but deep down, the hearts have drifted toward different shores. This ache is not always visible. It hides beneath routines, beneath duty, beneath the need to appear whole for the children, for the parents, for the eyes of society. And yet inside, a question keeps whispering, is this still love? Or is this just survival? Naming this ache does not mean giving up. It means finally seeing it clearly, without denial, without disguise. Only then can we begin to understand what it asks of us. It seems like such a simple question. If the love is gone, why not leave? But the answer is rarely simple. It lives in the quiet gaze of a child who still needs the warmth of two parents under one roof. It rests in the silver hair of aging parents who would rather not see another wound open in the family. and it hides in the heavy weight of society's eyes, ready to judge what they do not live through themselves. We do not stay because we are weak. We stay because there are threads stronger than desire, threads woven of duty, loyalty, and the fragile safety of home. Love may fade, but responsibility lingers. Compassion lingers. And sometimes that is enough to keep two people standing side by side, even when their hearts no longer meet in the middle. This is not the story we dreamed of when we first said yes to love. Yet it is the reality many quietly carry, day after day. A choice not of romance, but of survival. A choice not of passion, but of care. For children, for elders, for the fragile balance of a life already built. And so we remain. Not because love alone sustains us, but because we are tethered to something larger than ourselves. In The Little Prince, there is a tender line. It is the time you have devoted to your rose that makes your rose so important. Marriage, too, is shaped not only by love, but by time, by years of shared meals, shared laughter, shared tears, by countless small moments that, when woven together, become something larger than passion alone. Love is the spark. But what keeps two people tied to each other is memory. The invisible threads of attachment spun slowly through days of sacrifice and nights of quiet companionship. Threads you cannot see, but can feel, the way a familiar hand rests on the table, or the way you can read each other's silence without words. The person who was once lover becomes companion, not the one who ignites constant fire, but the one who walks beside you through seasons of change. Care is no longer constant pampering. Instead, it becomes a steady presence. Arguments no longer explode over small things, because both have learned the futility of endless fights. Life begins to resemble a glass of water, colorless, tasteless, yet utterly essential on a scorching day. What was once thrilling becomes ordinary, and yet within that ordinariness, a strange kind of stability grows. This is the quiet truth of midlife marriage. It is not always about being adored. It is about belonging, about endurance, about the subtle ways two lives intertwine. In 100 years of solitude, there is a line that lingers. It's not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it. In the second half of marriage, the questions begin to shift. No longer, am I still loved? But rather, am I living a life worth living? The ache is no longer about affection alone. It is about meaning, about whether the years you share feel like a weight or like a quiet shelter, about whether the memories you are building will sustain you or haunt you. When expectations soften, when resentments loosen their grip, something unexpected happens. A lightness begins to appear. You stop demanding that marriage be everything: ecstasy, salvation, perfection. You begin to see it instead as one part of life's tapestry, sometimes strong, sometimes frayed, but never the whole cloth. And in this acceptance, there is relief. Marriage is no longer a cage. It becomes a choice to walk on together, or to part with dignity, without blame. In naming the ache, we also name the freedom hidden within it, the freedom to live more gently, with each other and with ourselves. When we stop pretending, a gentler truth begins to surface. The truth that marriage does not have to be perfect to be meaningful. That staying does not always mean joy, and leaving does not always mean failure. From this point on, the invitation is simple. Live more kindly with yourself. Do not carry the burden of pleasing everyone. Do not punish yourself for the mistakes of another. For too long, many of us have tried to mold ourselves into shapes that fit others' needs. We silence our voices so the household remains calm. We swallow disappointment so the children will not see the cracks. We accept blame even when it was never ours to carry. But honesty asks something different. It asks us to return home, to the quiet place within, to admit when we are tired, to say without shame, "This is not enough for me," and to trust that speaking softly yet truthfully can free us more than silence ever could. Control of life begins not with changing another person, but with tending to our own emotions. When we hold them gently instead of suppressing them, we begin to discover a steadiness we thought we had lost. Unraveling with honesty is not an act of destruction. It is an act of care, a way of loosening the knots thoughts that have held us captive, so we can finally breathe again. Marriage is often imagined as two people gazing at each other, but with time, we learn it is more like a mirror, not only showing us our partner, but reflecting back the truth of ourselves. In the early years, that mirror shines with romance. We see our own tenderness, our passion, our willingness to give. But as the years unfold, the reflection changes. We begin to see our impatience, our unspoken fears. The parts of us we hoped marriage would fix, yet still remain. This is why the middle stretch feels so heavy. It is not only about us. It is also about me. Marriage asks us to face the pieces of ourselves that surface when intimacy grows quiet. The mirror does not lie. It shows where we cling, where we avoid, where we have yet to grow. Sometimes we do not like what we see, but if we can look with gentleness instead of judgment, marriage becomes less a prison and more a teacher. Each stage of life brings a different reflection, and perhaps the deeper purpose of marriage is not only to hold on to another, but to learn slowly, imperfectly, how to hold on to ourselves. With time, love often sheds its ornaments. It is no longer fireworks, no longer constant surprise. Instead, it becomes something quieter, like water. A glass of water is plain. It carries no color, no fragrance, no sweetness. And yet, on a day of burning heat, nothing restores us more. So it is with long companionship. The daily routines, cooking a meal, sharing a brief glance, sitting side by side in silence, may appear ordinary, but beneath their simplicity lies a deep endurance, the kind of presence that says, "Still here, even when words fall away." In youth, we crave the thrill. We chase the sweetness of romance, the intoxication of being chosen. But midlife invites another wisdom, that what sustains us is not always intensity, but reliability. Not constant fire, but steady warmth. This simplicity is not a loss. It is a shift, a movement from excitement to grounding, from wanting to be adored to learning how to stand whole within ourselves. Water may be plain, but it is life. And the ordinary moments of marriage, when held with quiet gratitude, can become the very thing that carries us through the driest seasons. In 100 years of solitude, there is a line that lingers like a quiet bell, What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it. As marriage matures, the questions evolve. We stop asking, "Am I still loved?" Instead, we whisper to ourselves, "Am I living a life worth living?" This question does not accuse. It simply opens a door. It invites us to look beyond the surface, to the shape of our days, the weight of our choices, the story we are writing with the time we have left. Perhaps marriage is not about keeping love in constant bloom. Perhaps it is about whether the years we spend together feel true, whether the memories we create will soften our hearts or leave us aching with regret. When expectation falls away, when resentment loosens its hold, a gentle light begins to appear. We see that marriage need not be a cage. It can be a path we choose to continue walking, or a journey we choose to release, with quiet dignity, with compassion, without blame. And in that recognition, we recover something precious. The freedom to live more gently. The freedom to belong, not only to another, but also to ourselves. What if marriage was never meant to be a cage or a fairy tale? What if it is, instead, a shifting landscape? A place where love begins, yes, but also where we learn patience, resilience, and the quiet art of staying present. Reframing does not erase the ache. It simply softens the edges, so the ache no longer defines the whole picture. Yes, the fire of passion may have dimmed, but in its place, another warmth can arise. The warmth of companionship, of steady presence, of shared history. Perhaps the goal is not eternal romance, but honest growth, not clinging to what once was, but recognizing what now is. When we loosen our grip on the old story, the one where marriage must always mean passion, or else it has failed, we create space for a gentler truth. That truth may sound like this: I do not need you to complete me. I only ask that we walk this road with mutual respect, with kindness, with freedom enough for each to breathe. And if that cannot be found, then honesty allows another path: to step apart, not as enemies, but as travelers who once shared the same stretch of road. Reframing asks us to choose tenderness, whether we stay or whether we let go. Because in either direction, the gift is the same. We return to ourselves, more whole than before. There comes a moment when we realize No one else can carry the weight of our happiness. Not a spouse, not a parent, not even the children we love. For years we may have placed that responsibility outside of ourselves, waiting for someone else's affection, approval, or presence to make us whole. But slowly, life teaches us another way. That true steadiness must rise from within. This is not a call to isolation. It is a call to balance. To know that even in marriage, even in companionship, we must keep tending the garden of our own soul. When we return to ourselves, we discover something quiet but powerful. The ability to sit in our own company without fear. The freedom to feel joy without needing it to be mirrored back. The strength to meet another as equals rather than as halves in search of completion. In this return, the heart softens. We can love without clinging. We can give without resentment. And we can stay, not out of dependency, but out of choice. Marriage may reflect us, but it cannot define us. Only by knowing ourselves can we walk beside another with true openness. And only by rooting happiness within can we weather the shifting seasons of love. There is a quiet freedom that arrives when expectations dissolve. When we no longer demand that marriage give us every answer or fill every empty space within. When we no longer hold on to old resentments like proof of how much we have suffered. In that release, the air feels lighter. The days unfold with less tension. We stop rehearsing what should have been said, what should have been done. Instead, we allow things to be as they are, imperfect, yet still enough to carry us forward. Marriage, then, is no longer a cage. It is a choice, a path we may continue walking side by side, knowing the steps will not always be even, or a journey we may release, quietly with compassion. Neither choice is failure. Both can be acts of courage. What matters is the spirit with which we carry them, with gentleness rather than bitterness, with honesty rather than pretense. To release expectation is not to stop caring. It is to care differently, to care without clutching, to hold space for both togetherness and freedom. And in that space, the heart begins to breathe again. Not because life has become perfect, but because we no longer need it to be. Perhaps the quiet lesson of midlife marriage is this: we do not always need a grand story to keep going. We need only what is steady, what is kind, what is true enough to hold. The storms have passed, the fire has cooled, but in their place something gentler may remain. Not the rush of romance, but the grounding of presence. Not the promise of forever, but the willingness to walk one more step, and then another. And if that is no longer possible, if the path has split too far apart, then release, too, can be an act of love. Not abandonment, but a final gift of freedom. A way of saying, we mattered, even if we cannot remain. In the end, marriage is not about winning or losing. It is about how we carried each other through the years we were given, and how we now carry ourselves with grace into what comes next. Sometimes enough is not fireworks. Enough is simply a hand to hold when the day feels long, or the courage to let go when the silence has spoken louder than words. Either way, enough is what allows us to continue, not as prisoners of expectation, but as travelers who have learned slowly, gently, that love takes many forms. So, let us end here with a softer breath than the one we began with. Marriage, love, companionship, they are never simple. They shift, they surprise, they wound, they heal. And through it all, they reflect back not only who we have been with another, but who we are becoming within ourselves. If you are staying, may it be with gentleness. If you are letting go, may it be with grace. And if you are simply learning to rest in your own company, may you find that this too is a kind of love. Do not try to carry every burden. Do not punish yourself for what was never yours to hold. You are allowed to be soft with yourself. You are allowed to choose peace over perfection. Marriage is not a cage. It is a mirror, a teacher, a season, and when its lessons feel heavy, remember, storms pass, silence can heal, and your life is still yours to shape. So tonight, may you lay down in calmness. May your heart feel a little lighter, your breath a little deeper, and may you remember, whatever happens in love, you are already enough.